Welcome to the concept art panel. Jesus Christ, this mic. My name is Louice Adler. I'm a concept artist and graphic designer at Tripwire Interactive.
And I'm John Bridges. I'm at High-Rez Studios, where I'm the lead concept artist for SMITE.
Hooray! Yay! We feel so special. So, this session is going to be pretty basic. I'll go over a couple of tips and tricks of what you should and should not do preferentially. Excuse my English. I'm not a native English speaker, so sometimes you may hear something towards the Swedish chef along those lines. Anyways, so I don't really know how to self-start this. We'll just jump right in. So I drew this many, many years ago. In fact, I bet to say it's like 10 plus years ago. And I figured it would be a good example of just thought process and how things can change, even your old drawings, so you can look at stuff and see how they've evolved. Now, whenever you're doing a concept of a character or a creature or anything like that, any living being, you want to take into fact of anatomy. Even if it's a very fictional thing, like a dragon, you still have incorporation of like what are they built off of, and you can take examples from living beings and mash them all together and make it work. Another thing to think about is flow. So for instance, let's grab a very bright color so you guys can see this. So for instance, flow, you have everything going in curves, like downwards and sideways and so on and so forth. And curves are very pleasant for the human eye, and especially when you're doing a composition, you want to have something that brings your eye full circle back into what you want to focus on. So in terms of a dragon, since it's serpentine, you can always combine your composition to be. So for instance, I'll go down here and show. So when you refine this, for instance, there's a lot of curves, but they always come back to a center point. So the flow of this one goes towards the eye, the ear goes towards the eye, and so on and so forth. You have a center point, and that would be this one right there. That being said, when I was working on this, I ended up changing a bit of the flow because your eye is literally going in two directions. And so I changed the shape of the horns to go this way. That way, they kind of bring you back up to the nose again, and so on and so forth. It's little things, but it's things that you will find that as you design something, you can test it and lead the eye purposely to where you think it should belong. And that is up to you. I don't know if you have anything to add. It's just stuff.
No, this is all pretty strong.
Okay. I'm doing well. Let's roll on. So when it comes to color theories, and I did a bunch of iterations on this guy. For instance, I wasn't happy with how the fins were going off in this direction, and it didn't really look like it was giving the look of the dragon the aggressive look that I wanted. So in the end, I followed through with more of these types of patterns, so it all flows in one direction. So your eye, once again, doesn't get split in multiple ways. Because sometimes you will have a very chaotic picture. Let's say there's a battle between three characters. And if the characters are basically fighting off in three different directions, like the main character's looking over this way, and then you have the heroine looking over that way, and then one guy facing towards the viewer, your eye is going to follow wherever they're pointing, which means that they'll be diverged in three different directions. That doesn't really give a good composition. Instead, you would perhaps have them fight a monster or something that is actually towards the center or in one direction only, so everything is flowing towards it. A good example is there was a magazine cover for the new Final Fantasy game that's coming out, and they had all the characters splat on in these really cool poses, but all the arms and weapons were pointing in all these directions. And so they had 5+ characters with weapons and arms going everywhere. Your eye was literally shooting in so many different directions that it was a very chaotic cover. It didn't bring anything to a centerpiece. Now, let's move on to color, if I can find my layers. So, in terms of colors, there's a lot of things you can do. Colors play a huge part in when you're drawing, and I'm sure John can tell you all about that stuff as well.
Mm-hmm.
for instance, one design can take on a huge amount of appearances simply by changing the color palette. You don't have to change the line art, you just have to change the colors. And that will give the character so much a different message. The reason being is because some colors represent different things in different cultures. So for instance, the color white is represented as something pure and graceful and innocent in our culture, whereas in Asia, it's actually the color of mourning. It's a color of death. It's something spiritual, but it's in the negative sense of the word. And so when you're doing colors, you have to take all these things into consideration, especially if it's a protagonist, antagonist, or something that has a lot of focus. Because if you give them the wrong color scheme, you're sending all the wrong messages without even realizing it. So gold is a very rich and high prosperous color in many cultures, but that also makes it seem as if it's a good kind of dragon, if you will. You can turn it into a white color, which notice that there's no pure whites anywhere in this particular piece. This means that when you're drawing a white-clothed character, you want to make sure that you still have very many different shades of white in there. So for instance, not grayscale. Grayscale actually makes the picture very boring. And so if you color pick on any of these areas, you'll find that they are light purples, light pinks, light pearl, light beige, and they all bring it together to make it seem as if it's a white/silver dragon, even though it's not. Another thing is when you go green, there is not single greens. You have so many. You have olives, you have forest, you have moss, you have neons and so on. You can build up a really interesting character by using many different types. And you want to bring in woodland colors too, like browns and barks and dirt, coppers, and so on and so forth. Let's see. I'll just go over the colors, and I'm sure Jeff is. Jeff, why do I keep calling you Jeff? John!
It's because the last name.
I'm so sorry. Same thing with red. You can make very interesting color schemes with red without being just a solid red. You can have oranges, you can have grays. Same thing with blues. You can have navies, you can have cyans, you can have royal blues, and so on and so forth. And my favorite, black. Notice, not a single color of black in here. It is either dark grays, which is similar, but they have a tint of red in them. They have a tint of blue in them. They have a tint of brown in them. Every single shade in this dragon is actually not a pure grayscale. It's actually a shade of a different color, if that makes any sense. And take that into consideration. If you're having a very muted character that is going to have all grays or all whites, still make sure that it's a tint of a different color, not just, the gradation from white to black. It will destroy your character and make it very flat. Yes. Let's do this. Oh, the screen is so tiny. Everything is so tiny. Not really easy to display this on such a small screen. I should have taken that into consideration. So that's my fault. But let's take on a hue saturation layer to give us a point here. So when you're taking down the hue and saturation on all these, you can tell that some of these look almost identical, and that's because the colors that I've chosen, they will blend together really, really well to the point of they're indistinguishable when you actually take down the saturation. This is a bad thing in many situations. You want to have a very distinct change between them. So for instance, if you have, oh gosh, sorry, one moment. It selected the wrong layer. So the difference between this guy, and this guy, that's actually good. You can start seeing very distinct shade differences. Taking down the hue and saturation on your image is going to help build up a contrast without actually changing any colors. Values have a huge impact on how your character is read. So if you want to get some practice in getting something to really pop, but you can't seem to get it to work, take off all the colors. Just put on a hue and saturation layer on top of all your layers, and see where you can make some improvements. Does that make sense? I'm going to go into some details on some stuff. So in the meanwhile, if you have questions at any point, just raise your hand and we'll answer them. That's pretty much the easiest way to do this, because I can rant and rant and rant, and John's going to get bored and we get frustrated. So if you have a question, please just raise your hand. In the meanwhile, yes.
So when you're setting these characters into a background, how do you handle the colors of the background? Do you make them contrast, sort of complement? Surely you don't have them blend in, of course.
So I'm going to let John help me fill in on that question while I'm doing this, because I can't do two things at once.
Well, generally in concept art, you're not so worried about a background. You're worried about just developing the design of a character, because you don't have much control over the background. That's, at least where I work anyway, that's a whole separate thing, and the background's already established. For an illustration or something like a loading card art in a game, yeah, then you would definitely want to work in a background that's in some kind of harmony with that character, where you're going to balance your warms and your cool colors. And it obviously it varies from piece to piece, and what kind of mood you're aiming for, what kind of feel you want to have for that character. Is it evil? Is it good? That's all going to change the way you approach it.
Yep.
And the lighting too, if you want it super dramatic or you want it soft and overall. But generally in just concepting, which is just the design stuff, it's not so much about drawing or making it look perfect, but about designing, really.
And conveying an idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for your kind of concept art, do you focus solely on characters and their environments?
Yeah, for what I do, we're on SMITE. My team is strictly about developing characters and new iterations on old characters and so forth. Because
So
the no, go ahead.
There's a separate team for environment design?
That's right. We've got a separate environment team, which includes concept artists who will develop things that go in the environment, placeables, things like that, the overall look and feel of it, and another artist who actually create the 3D assets based on their concept art.
So do these two different teams communicate to, say, have the character and the environment complement each other?
We do when we're developing like a new map. In SMITE, it's not like other games where there's a whole lot of different landscapes to go in. We have certain maps, and it's just kind of a battleground area. And we do one new map a year, and so there is some communication that goes on with designing the elements that go in there and how they're going to play off particular characters and so forth, that we're kind of launching at the same time as the map. In another game, like the previous one I worked on, Lichdom, I did do a lot of the environment concept for that one, which was designed to tie in each different level. We had a different kind of a theme, a different kind of environmental location. One was a wintry kind of one. Another one was like an eldritch underground sort of undead type thing. And you develop details and things like that, like in the architecture, that you can then reflect in the characters and the NPCs that inhabit that, to make them look like they're part of the same culture that developed that architecture and that environment.
Personally, which one did you prefer?
Personally, it's tough. I like characters best, so I do like being able to concentrate on them. And I do like working on a game that puts out constant content, that, something I do is going to actually be made public within a few months, as opposed to like 2 or 3 years, like on a longer game like Lichdom. It's a balance. It's fun to develop the whole kind of, the pre-production phase is pretty fun, where you're just digging in and just taking wild stabs at what is this going to be, and you hone it down from there. And once you start production, you're a little more intent on actual making assets that are going to work and function. But pre-production is kind of pie in the sky, look and feel, developing mood. And so you can go pretty crazy with that, and that's kind of fun.
How is the critique experience within a team?
We at High-Rez anyway, we have a weekly meeting with the entire character team, which is concept artists and the actual modelers, and we'll go over each other's work and just add our 2 cents, and they'll add their 2 cents on our stuff. And sometimes it can be a little rough when something you've worked on for a long time, doesn't quite pass. But other times, it goes pretty well. So.
If you had to guess, how many concepts does a specific design go through before it hits that final design?
That can so vary. I've had some that, you just do like 2 or 3 iterations and everybody's like, yeah, that one. And then other ones where you're just spinning and spinning and spinning and you're doing like dozens and dozens and dozens, on the same character, variations and size and shape and everything before you finally land on something that everybody likes. So yeah, it can completely vary. And in a game like Lichdom, we spent a lot of time working on certain characters, and then they would decide to change the story. Those characters are gone, all that work. Let's do some new ones now.
How is it adjusting to that?
You just get used to it. It's a part of the way the industry works, and you get used to doing it. It can be a little frustrating, but
Yeah.
Over there.
When looking at either portfolios for like new hires or people who haven't worked for your company before or haven't done a professional project, what do you want to see in terms of? I guess maybe I should clarify the difference between a non-professional portfolio, having no true examples of working for a client doing all these iterations and phases for someone, versus like someone who's actually done what you've done or worked on a game like that would already have those examples.
Right.
What do you look for in a portfolio of a person who hasn't done it, or what would you tell them to make their portfolio more like someone who's done it?
Ooh, I got an answer for that one. If you have no industry experience under your belt, you can still make up a world or a project on your own and utilize the same process of thinking. In fact, you should. If you don't have, there's plenty of portfolios online from professionals. Look at how they are presenting their work. Imitate them if you have to, but with your own style and with your own approach. Something that most companies want to see is that where's your thought process? How did you arrive at the design of this particular character? Just having a final fleshed out character doesn't tell them necessarily anything. They don't know what reference you used. They don't know how many iterations you went through coming up with that final concept. They want to see your silhouettes. They want to see your sketches. They want to see your outfit options.
It's like in those old math assignments. You got to show your work.
You
How
have
did
to.
you get there?
Just one pretty picture is really not going to land you a job. They want to see how efficient you are in creating a character. Because they could hire they can hire someone to paint a pretty picture, but
Right.
in the end,
Yeah, and as far as concept goes, it's not about how well you draw. It's about how well you think.
yeah.
I've always seen kind of the disconnect between like other industries or other jobs saying, pick your 6 best pieces and show it. When concept has a completely different process. It took me a minute to figure that out.
No, in fact, we have a new hire that's starting soon, a couple weeks, and in her portfolio, she's new to the industry too. She'd done a little bit of freelancing, but she had done a few things where she liked SMITE. She said, hey, what would it be like if I created my own god for SMITE? Because SMITE is mythological characters. We just draw from the world's religions and mythologies. And she picked one and developed it, did all the steps, silhouette, build up, all kinds of iteration, and so forth. And that kind of thing was in her portfolio, and that really helped in us deciding to hire her.
Thanks so much.
Another thing is that if you're real quick, sorry. Another thing is that if you have an idea for a character and whatnot, please, for the love of anything, avoid the cliches. Seriously, don't do another Cloud Strife. Don't do another Tank Girl. Don't do another My Little Pony or whatever it may be. Try and think out of the box. People want to see unique things. Even if you're applying for a game studio that does FPSs or MOBAs or whatever, still think out of the box and think about, okay, I love their art style. I want to give them something badass. But I want to do something that they haven't thought of. Because they want to see new stuff. They don't want more of the old, because that doesn't sell in the end. That's going to run dry. They want to see what you can come up with and what you can give them that is new and cool. So think out of the box, please. Sorry.
Yep.
What was the question? Yes, sir.
Of those concept art, the concept art that you created that is not used, but it's a pity that, whatever you worked on those characters, did you have an outlet with those? Are you allowed somehow, I don't know, it doesn't
Yeah, it completely varies
It
depending on the
does.
studio. I mean, they own the work effectively. You're a
Yeah.
paid employee, and they get to decide if you can put it out or not. Most studios are pretty good about that, and they'll let you show it eventually. But it's
Yeah.
usually sometime after the game is actually shipped. And then for games that never ship, sometimes that art is in limbo forever.
Yeah, and on that, even if you create a character that may not ever get shipped, and you may be able to show the concept art later, it's still owned by the company. It's not yours. Even if you've thought it up, even if it's completely unique and it's all your idea, it's still theirs. And even if they don't use it, you can't. Like very, very many times, it's theirs. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, so even if you, on the studios where you can't show your art, can you still claim it? Can you like put on resumes, creator of character this, world that?
Yeah, you can certainly use it. It's pretty much an unspoken rule in the industry that you can show that work when you're looking to get a job, just not publicly. You can't post it in a public place, but you know,
still claim it
you can.
publicly?
Yeah. Well, I don't understand what you mean by claim it.
Well, you know, can you say on LinkedIn, I created this god, this goddess, this world, whatever specific.
Oh, sure.
Or
If
can
it's-
you just say, I worked on SMITE?
No, I think obviously it depends on the company you're working for.
Yeah.
But they're all going to have different attitudes towards that. But yeah, for the most part, that's not a problem for
And-
actually claiming it.
And mind you, this industry may seem very big. It's not.
Yeah, everybody kind of
It's
knows
not.
everybody.
Yeah, everyone. And if they don't know you directly, they know you indirectly through your colleague or their friend or their wife or whatever it may be. So don't do bad things. Keep your sleeves clean. And above all, like, you know, be honest. Don't try and fool someone and come to an interview going like, oh, no, I've never worked with that guy. Oh, no, I'm totally, that work is totally mine. I didn't trace that. They know. Don't try and trick yourself.
Has High-Rez Studios done a concept art book?
I don't believe we have. No.
I love
We
it.
have.
What?
We have.
Yeah.
Sorry.
How was it putting together a concept art book?
Stressful.
Stressful.
It was very much last minute. It was been a dream for Tripwire to do a Killing Floor 2 art book for forever. And then finally we had a time and people were like, all right, cool. We want to do this. How much time do we have? Okay, cool. Let's do it. It was very stressful.
How much time did you have?
We had a couple of weeks to pull together all the art assets, and it was mostly on myself actually to design and put together all that stuff with the help of 2 other people maybe. That was tremendous. It ended up becoming an over 100-page book with weapon renders, with weapon concepts, character concepts, environment art, everything. So if you get the collector's edition, you will get the art book. Just saying.
Sell it independently of the collector's edition?
You can get a digital edition. You can get it. I mean, I'm sure there's a PDF lurking around somewhere on the web of someone that just extracted the art book and put it online.
Yes,
Let's
that
be
happens.
frank. It's not that hard. But if you do get the game, you will get a bunch of goodies, and the art book will be included. It's a digital one, though.
So how did it feel holding the finished product?
I never physically held it because it's all digital, but it felt great. I was kind of like, yes, you did it. Sorry, yes.
Anything else? Anyone?
If not, I'm going to go over some fun things. And I'm sure that John can give even more awesome tips and tricks. So for instance, when you're shading a character and so on and so forth, if you just suddenly decide, like, I really encourage you to work in layers. Traditional artists have a tendency to work all on one layer and paint, eyedrop tool, paint, and all of a sudden they realize, crap, I should have changed this. What do I do? So I really encourage you to step out of your comfort zone and utilize layers as much as humanly possible. They
Absolutely.
are your best friend. In fact, there's this option right here that says solid color. If you ever use this is what it's going to look like. And if you have something, let's see. So here's the alpha, for instance, which is really messy. But this is the alpha for the teeth of this dragon. And I decided that, well, crap, I need to change this. Now I can actually do that on the fly in this option right here. It didn't cost me anything because I was structured. I did everything in blocks and everything on a separate layer. And your art director or whoever your superior might be will love it because they'll be like, well, I love this character you got. Can we make the cape green? And
It happens all the time.
Yes. And if you are organized, if you have your stuff together, you will thank yourself for it because it will save you so much time if you have it divided in layers and organized.
And this is something that actually applies to digital illustration as well. We use illustrations for the loading cards for the SMITE characters.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times those things have to be edited at the last minute because they might have made a change to the actual character model in game, and the card art has to be on model for that. And if that's on elements are all on separate layers, it makes it super easy to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're not, it's a nightmare. And it also helps too because sometimes we have motion graphics artists who'll sometimes take the card art and do advertising or marketing art based on it that has animations added.
Which is so cool.
Yeah. It's cool to see a piece of 2D art actually come to life like that. But they have to separate. If that stuff is not already separated into layers, they have to painstakingly go in and try to lasso things and do it, which does not make them happy.
No.
So
Basically, the more OCD you are about your work and the more OCD you are about organizing, the better off you'll be. You'll be a very valued asset to your team because you'll be the one person probably that has organized file with names, not just layer one like this one, not just like this one and through your entire document. Just make sure that it has a naming convention that makes sense for the project and keep your files neat.
And you don't necessarily have to do it as you're going along.
Oh,
as
no.
far as the naming and all that, that's a cleanup stage you can
Yes.
do later when you're towards the end and getting ready to hand it off.
In fact, what I tend to do is that everything is usually checked in and backed up at the end of the day if you're organized, which you should be. So before you close out the file for the day, just name your layers. Have it done. Even if you change them the day after, in case someone needs that file, they'll have it organized, and you don't have to worry about a thing. So make it a habit before you close the file for the day. Make sure it's legible. Make sure that you know where you're picking up your pen the day after. In any way.
What kind of backup techniques you are using? Sorry, I'm a programmer, so.
Sorry, what kind of what?
What type of backup techniques do you use?
P4?
Yeah, pretty much. Perforce.
Yep.
Yeah. Though even just on my local drive, I do lots of iterative saves. I
Yeah.
recommend that too, because one crash and all your work is gone if you don't do it that way.
Control S, Control S, Control
Yes.
S, Control S. It's your best friend. We had before when we were even smaller, Tripwire, we had we were basically having our office in a very old building. And whenever there would be a thunderstorm coming through, one part of the building far down the hallway would go black, and you would hear. And then further down the line, as things start to flicker, you Control S, Control S, Control S. I'm not even joking.
Yeah.
This was a thing every time. And sometimes it will hit your end of the office, and you will be the one screaming. And then they would get the cue further down the hall. It was the worst. Thankfully, it's better now. But that was very much a thing.
Yeah, we've got APCs now based on some past events too.
Oh,
So the
man.
battery packs that'll
Yeah.
give you at least a chance to
To save
shut
it.
things down properly if the power goes out. But sometimes they fail.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, that's the thing. You'll hear this litany of these peeling whines as these things don't quite work right.
No, it was really that was a memory for sure. And then
We had an illustrator actually lose some work, about 3 hours of work recently due to a power outage, and he was so absorbed he hadn't been doing the iterative saves, and when he went back in to open his file, it was all black with just a red line across it.
No.
So we called that his study in black and red.
Oh gosh. In all seriousness, get used to Control S, no matter what program you're using. I know a lot of Adobe's products and Maya and everyone, even in 3D, they have autosaves. if you do auto saves and make sure that that is set up, they can do incremental saves where they make a whole new file every time for X amount of times before they go back and write over it. I mean, look into it. No matter what software you're using, don't be silly. Back up your stuff. Make sure that it gets there, because you don't know what's going to happen. It could be a brownout, and then you're sitting there going, well, 5 hours. It's okay. I only got it right. Not that I have not ever been in that position. Never. It's terrible. Yeah.
What are Tripwire and High-Rez's experience working with remote artists, or if you do at all?
With, sorry?
Remote artists,
Oh.
freelancers. We actually do a little bit of that.
Mhm.
We there are a couple of guys who started out in the fan art community, who did some fan art that a lot of people online liked, and we thought, oh, we might do a SMITE skin based on that, and we would actually, pay them to use their skin. And there was another one who we've actually had develop some concepts as a freelancer from time to time. And more often for the actual loading card art, we use a lot of freelance illustrators for that, and they're spread all over the globe. We've got a couple in Germany. There's one down in Argentina. So yeah, they're all over the place.
Yes, we don't so much do with the 2D art of things, but we definitely contract out when there's a need for it with them getting levels, weapons, characters, skins, so on and so forth. If there's a need, we do contract work. It's how I got hired many years ago. I did contract work with Tripwire for a bit over a year before I got full-time. And that was anything from magazine advertisements to concept art to logo design, so on and so forth. So yeah, I think any company will at some point or another look for contract work. It's nice and easy.
Yes.
Question. So I'm kind of in that limbo stage right now where I'm a recent graduate, but
Mhm.
I don't have any professional experience yet, and trying to find positions that are actually, willing to give me a shot, because I mean, like the frustration was they want interns, but you have to be in school. Well, I'm not in school.
Mhm.
The other side is they want people that have 3+, 4+, 5 years experience. and they don't have that.
Yes.
So it's been like really slim pickings trying to find people that are looking for entry position jobs, and any recommendations for that?
Obviously, it's going to vary from company to company, just what they're looking for. We do entry-level people. The person we just hired doesn't have experience except a little bit of freelance. But we also sometimes very specifically look for senior talent who have
Yeah.
had a lot of years and experience behind them. It just depends on what kind of hole you're trying to fill in your pipeline. At least on the concept art side, really your portfolio is everything. That
Mhm.
It doesn't matter how much experience you have if your portfolio doesn't cut it, or how little experience you have. I mean, if you have a fantastic portfolio and you've never worked for anybody before, you still have a pretty good chance of getting in.
Yeah. And it's exactly like that, really. Like I said, I met David Hensley many years ago here, and I offered up my portfolio, and he said, okay, cool, I'll contact you if you need anything. And as luck had it, they needed advertisements, and I started out doing advertisements, and then I gradually got different types of work from them. And it's just basically, and I'd done a bunch of freelance work before then, and it was a freelance work with all miscellaneous kind of things. I did magazine advertisements, I did logo work, I did t-shirt designs. It was whatever I could actually get food on the table with. And some clients were better than others, and freelance is always going to be like that. And yeah, eventually you just hit it. But until then, you're just going to have to keep on trucking and refine your portfolio and keep looking for work relevant for your portfolio. And that can be hard, so sometimes you have to do McDonald's or whatever for a little while. But whatever, just keep at it.
Yeah, and sometimes it's just a matter of finding that right fit.
Yep.
We've looked at people who've had amazing work, but it just wasn't quite what we were looking for SMITE, so we had to pass on them.
Yeah, and that's huge as well, actually. If you're looking for a particular job at a particular studio, you have to tailor your portfolio to them. You can't expect to send in work to a FBS-dominated studio with My Little Pony sketches. Or you know, having anime characters for something that is only doing realistic games. Sure, you don't know what's coming down their pipeline. They might want to try a new franchise at some point, but you have to tailor your portfolio and your style to what potentially they could work with.
So what you're saying then is, if I want to go work for like certain studio or something, I might have to actually make certain pieces that are in their, you know,
Yes.
specifically for them, just to display that I can do what they're looking for.
Yes. I'm not saying you have to do an entire portfolio, but you should have at least one or two strong pieces that are in their art style or applied to whatever franchises they have under their belts. Because frankly, you may have the most amazing skills at shading or sketching and whatnot, and people may look at your portfolio and go, "Oh, that's badass." But we're not doing that type of game. You know, they want to see if you're creative in the field that they are doing work in, because if it turns out that they hire an artist that has amazing shading, and then they ask them, "Okay, cool, can you do a tank?" And the guy's like, "I can draw a bicycle." You know, it's not really the same thing. Then they just wasted time and money on you, and you never want to be in that position.
Yeah, and some of it really does come back to some of the specialization issues, and that the larger the company, the more specialized things will be. I know in particular at High-Rez on the Paladins project, they have some guys who are just about concepting weapons. You know,
Yeah.
not even characters or environments. They're just doing weapons because they're very good at putting that kind of stuff together. But then in other companies, you might be called on to do a little bit of everything else.
And to be frank, as an artist, you should never, ever stop expanding your own skill set. If you have never drawn with ink before, start drawing in ink. If you haven't drawn a mech before, start drawing mechs. I mean, you have the more talented you are in adapting your style to what the client needs, the higher the probability is that they're going to hire you or get more work from you. You should never limit yourself to one thing and say that, "Well, I'm a badass at drawing puppies. I can do hyper-realistic dogs of any kind, and I have this really cool style, but I can never draw a horse." You know, it's one of those things, like, don't limit yourself. If you feel that, "Oh, shite, I am so bad at drawing cars," start drawing cars. You know, you will never disappoint yourself by expanding your skill sets. You know, I've been really bad at hard surface. I started drawing hard surface again. You know, that kind of stuff. Yeah. Anyways.
What got both of you into concept art? How did you both get started, I guess?
Well, in my case, I actually started my career as an illustrator, doing freelance illustration and a little bit of comics work. And I always envisioned actually going into comics or storyboarding or something like that. And I ended up working with a friend who was starting off a game, moving from an RPG company, pen and paper RPGs, to video games. And he asked me to come join them doing work for that, developing. It was one of those small companies where I wore multiple hats. I was the art director, I was a graphic designer, I was a concept artist. You know, all these different, anything art related I kind of had to be involved with. And it just kind of went from there, more and more focused on games.
It's pretty similar in terms of wearing many different hats. Like I mentioned, I did magazine advertisements, I did logo work, I did character concepts, creature concepts for miscellaneous projects as a freelancer. It really was just whatever I could do to, you know, put food on the table, really. So sometimes I would have to work with clients that had outrageous ideas or had no idea what they wanted. You know, that's the most fun one. You know, they would come like, "Oh yeah, I have this amazing thing I want you to do, and it's gonna be yeah." And you're standing there going like, "Okay, cool. So have you envisioned it in this direction?" No. But I want this. And they're really difficult to work with because you really don't know what they're after, but you're trying to like get them inspired and get them to give you something. So sometimes it's all up to you to get the wheel rolling, and other times you're just gonna have to draw them that unicorn with goat wings that doesn't exist, but they totally want it anyway. And at the end of the day, it might not be a work that you're proud of, but it was exactly what the client wanted. But you got paid. It's just how it is sometimes. So even though you know that the anatomy of this particular thing is absolutely out the window, it could never lift off the ground, it's exactly what the client wanted. You gave them what they wanted. And sometimes that's the harsh reality of things. You might know more than the client, but you cannot really do that. You have to be professional. You have to meet them halfway. And that goes for any job, really. So, until you're rich and you have that, the resources to do everything you want exactly your way, I'm afraid you're just going to have to grin and bear it.
Yeah.
It's the reality of things. Sorry, big rant.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
I'm glad. Yes. Now, I'm doing something you shouldn't do. I'm putting both my shadows and my highlights on the same layer. You shouldn't do that. You should separate the two. And so that way you have full control of your image. But I'm just going to break the rules here and go for it. And yeah. Anyways, if you have questions in terms of tips and tricks for doing something better in our Photoshop, or how to hash out an idea and so on and so forth, we'll be more than happy to try and answer them. Or anything else for that matter. So just, this is your chance.
So for your line art, do you have a skeleton underlying just the line art and then you move to that line art past it? Or
So-
do you just draw the line art?
When I started this drawing, it was this rugged, skeletal, measly looking thing that looked nothing like the final product. But it gave me an idea of the mask, gave me an idea of, how the neck would be built up. Whenever you're drawing a character, a humanized character as well, never start with the outfit. Draw up the pose, draw it up as rough as you need it to be. You can refine it later, but you have to get the anatomy right. If you do the outfit first, chances are something's going to look off and you don't know what it is. So same thing with a mythological creature. Look at anatomy, look at structure, look at mass, sketch it out. Make sure that you get that stuff right before you dress or detail your character or creature. Same thing goes for a dragon. Make sure, in this case, make sure that you know where the ear is going to be. You know how big the skull is. You know how big the neck is. And once you have all that stuff down, you can start, putting on a new layer and fleshing it out and doing all the fun things like the scales, the fins, the ears, the ear, all that stuff. It will save you time. It sounds tedious, but if you do your homework and do it step by step, it saves so much time. I can't stress that enough.
What advice do you have for light directions, like how it's hitting the character?
Personally, what I do this. This is my sun. Sun is shining in this direction. Let's imagine the sun hitting at this direction. Literally. In my head, I always have a source of where the light source is coming from. If you can't envision it, or you have trouble remembering it, draw it out. Make a dot on your paper and look at references online. For if you don't know how a shape would actually be shaded or lit, look online. Have references next to you as you're drawing. Even though it doesn't contain all the details that your drawing does, it still gives you a general idea of how deep the shadow would be, how bright the highlight would be, material and all that sort of stuff. Reference. So draw a source, remember that source, and just go for it. I don't know if you have better advice to that.
No, yeah, stick to your light source. Yeah, you don't want to pull away from that. A lot of times in the early stages, I don't even worry about light source. I'm just doing pretty flat areas of line and color. And it's not until you start want to get refined more and really want to start communicating those forms better that you start bringing in light. And it's kind of a trend you see in a lot of concept art, but it's there for a reason, is people using secondary rim lights to call out the opposite side of a character. And you see it a lot. It can get tiring, but it serves a good function and showing off those forms and can really help a modeler understand how that character is constructed. And in the end of the day, that's what you're aiming for. You're communicating to a character modeler how he's going to build this character and make it a real 3D asset.
Yeah. And like I said before, surface plays a lot of part in how shading and highlighting and so on and so forth is going to behave, especially when you're digitally painting. So for instance, this surface that I'm doodling on right now, it has a pretty like polished, glossy surface. So it would be, you know, like a polished shell or a polished scale and so on and so forth. So the highlight would be pretty big. And now, had it been another surface that, like here, that is matte and it doesn't have, like that's a good surface. This surface is completely matte. It reflects light, but it doesn't have a hard highlight like a glossy surface would. And so you have to pay attention to that when you're defining your character's materials as well. That's why I'm saying reference. Everything doesn't have a highlight that is like this big black, or sorry, big white blob. Sometimes the surface has very subtle highlights, and you have to fill those in a specific way.
Yeah, I would recommend really studying different materials and how to portray those and render those, because that's a big part of character art.
And I can't say it enough. I mean, it's going to take a while to learn, and I still really don't feel like I have learned some of the tips and tricks that my fellow colleagues do. And I mean, that's something I have to work on, basically.
Yes.
Who are your favorite concept artists?
Oh.
That you
Ugh.
admire?
That's tough.
That is tough. It's an endless list, and you're always
Yeah.
finding new guys. If you ever look at artstation.com, every day I'll go there and look at stuff. And there's an activity feed you can get where you can follow different artists and just see whatever the latest thing they've posted is. And sometimes you want to, okay, I quit. I can't do this anymore.
Exactly.
You guys are too good. I can't keep up.
Yeah.
And then other times you're like, wow, this makes me really want to draw.
Mm-hmm.
So.
With me, it's always a love-hate relationship,
Yep.
because it's like you'll pull up the art and you're like, oh, that's beautiful. Where's the knife? But at the same time, you feel that urge, like, I can do this. I have. You don't look at the person's age. For the love of God, don't look at their age. Don't. That's the worst you can do to yourself.
Usually like in their late teens or early 20s.
Exactly. Don't do that to yourself. Please don't. That's soul crushing. Instead, look at the techniques they did. Look at how they did it. Study their drawing. Look at, like, can I imitate that? Can I figure out how they did that? Like, try and dissect the pictures that you admire. Like, pull them into Photoshop. Put them right next to your blank canvas. And go like, okay, cool. Let's color pick that. Let's try and reproduce that shine that he did. Okay, let's color pick and copy this particular piece of armor and reproduce that on your canvas. There's no quicker way to learn than to study the masters. Sorry.
How much time daily do you spend practicing these techniques, trying to learn new ones?
Depends on how.
Depends on what deadlines you're facing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
There's a lot of times where you want to draw all day, every day, and then your job comes and says, you don't have time for that. We have advertisements to do.
Yep.
And then you're like,
or there's meetings you have to go sit in, or all kinds of other stuff like that.
So even though you have these fantastic dreams where you're like, today I'm going to do this, that doesn't necessarily always come true. This is why drawing on your own at home, even though you are dead tired, is sometimes the only option to get better. Because work doesn't always allow you to practice. There's no time. You have a product to do. You have a deadline to meet. And then they're not going to sit there and give you a week to study, this guy's work on work time because you want to get better. You're going to have to do that on your spare time. There's really no mercy in the industry in that respect.
Yeah.
If you want to get better while you're working on the project you're doing. And if you don't have time, do it at home.
How much of your spare time do you dedicate to it?
It really depends on what else is going on in my life, but frankly, weekends is, I draw as much as I can. Inktober is the perfect excuse.
Mm-hmm.
You're forcing yourself to do a drawing every day, and even if it's just a doodle, but you're still practicing. You're still doing something every day, even though you're dead tired. You came home and I'm like, oh God, the crunch today. Hey. Okay, cool, Inktober. Let's do it. And then, you have an excuse. You put up goals for yourself and you meet them, and that gets you better. Even if you think the drawing looks crap, you've still exercised your hand. You still exercised your brain. That's one thing. I think I say this every time there's a panel here, is your hand is directly connected to your brain, obviously, but the way you get better is basically fine motor skills. This looks extremely boring, but you should really be doing this. So, for instance, this here. When you're drawing, you want to draw multiple lines. You want to draw multiple circles. You want to draw. What's the fine word for that? It's no, it's repetitive movement, but it's repetitive muscle memory.
Muscle
Thank
memory,
you.
there you go.
Drawing is all about muscle memory.
Mhm.
I say this every time we have a panel here because it's so inherently true. The more you draw circles, the better you're going to get at them. The more you draw people's faces, the better you're going to get at them because your hand remembers this stuff. Same as with any musician. If you're away from your instrument for a couple of weeks, yeah, it's going to sound bad because you haven't practiced. You haven't gotten the motions in. Same thing with drawing. If you don't draw often, you're going to feel rusty. You're going to pick up the pad and you're going to like, well, this is crap. And then you get discouraged. Draw often. Doodle. Sketch. Paint. Nonsense. It doesn't matter. Get your hand moving. Get your muscles working. It's your best asset. You can't let them rust. That way, don't get arthritis. Or
No, I had a fellow artist who got tendonitis, but it wasn't from drawing. It was from playing too many video games.
That too.
But it kept him from drawing for a few weeks.
Yeah. No, in all seriousness, be kind to yourself. Your hand is basically your livelihood if you're an
Yep.
artist.
Yep.
Don't screw yourself over. Even though it's all fun and games to play video games to X amount of hours in the night, remember that your hand is actually your tool or your trade. If you ruin your hand, you're going to be useless to your clients, you're going to be useless to your boss, and then they're going to find someone that takes it more seriously. Go ahead.
Kristen?
Do you do, like, I guess, combat, like, art block and stuff like that?
Draw.
Yeah, it can be tough. Sometimes you do draw a blank. There's a neat tool that's out right now. They just did a Kickstarter for an expansion for it. It's a thing called the Reckless deck. This guy put together a deck. It's just full of ideas for drawing things. And you can mix and match them in different ways. Yeah, there's a Kickstarter right now for an expansion to it. I think you could buy the base deck on Amazon now. But it's divided into categories and things, and you can mix and match and randomly draw
So
things.
it's like improv for artists.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
really funny.
Exactly.
I like
it's,
it.
It's pretty cool. It's called the Reckless deck.
But what I tend to do for art blocks is just draw something that you're familiar with, even if it's something extremely boring that you've been drawing a million times. At least you're drawing something and getting the motions back in, and it helps. I draw dragons a whole lot. I love dragons. It has nothing to do with my job at Tripwire. Goodness knows we don't do fantasy games, but I love fantasy. I still take the time that when I get an art block or anything else, I still take the time to draw the things I enjoy. Because, frankly, drawing zombies is a crap ton of fun. Drawing characters is a crap ton of fun. But you still want to, don't let your passion, whittle out. Take the time to draw things that you enjoy, even if it's anime characters. Just don't do it at work. That's how I cure mine, is that I just get selfish and draw something that I enjoy.
Yeah, there's some guys that just take the time off work to develop their own sort of fantasy world, and the stories in their head, and how am I going to develop these characters over here, or this guy over here, and what's over in this part, and what's part of this story, and it gives them constant ideas just to spur sketching and so forth.
My program is locked up.
Oh,
For some reason, it still thinks that I want my brush when I don't want my brush. Let's save and start this up again. Oh my goodness. But yeah, I drew an environment once that's now my desktop backgrounds to basically remind me that, okay, you don't draw environments nearly as often as you draw anything else. Draw environments, do something, remind yourself to do stuff that you're weak at. Come on, Photoshop.
Weak, you say. That was pretty great to me.
Well, I appreciate that, but it's one of those things that your worst critic is yourself.
Mhm.
But that's the critic that you have to listen to. You have to deal with that critic every day. And that's the only thing stopping you too. So if you keep bantering yourself down saying that, no, I'm never going to do this, I'm never going to be good at this, of course it's never going to work. You have to get over yourself. You have to get past that. Same thing when you're looking at all that pretty art online and you're like, I could never be like this guy. Grab a pen, start drawing. It's the only way to get past that.
There was a good cartoon someone posted on Facebook today. Has a guy looking at this drawing going, I'm pretty proud of this drawing I just did. Just looking at it. I hate this drawing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I forget the guy who did it, but yeah.
So you all follow the same people?
I was gonna say, it makes it feel better. One of my classmates, I think she's probably one of the most phenomenal artists too. She even got full ride scholarship and everything for doing the poster there and everything. And constantly, talking to her on Facebook and stuff, and she's always sitting there saying, "Oh, this is crap," or "I hate it," or she's always pushing herself. In her own eyes, she thinks she could be so much better, and I still think she's 20 times better than me. So.
Well, the better you get, the more problems you see in your own work, because you're educated more to what those problems are, and it just kind of never ends. And when it does end, that's when you stop growing as an artist, frankly.
I was just going to say that. The more you should be very grateful that you're seeing errors in your drawings. You really should, because that means that you just grew. It's a good thing. You might not think that way when you're looking at your piece of drawing and you're like, oh, well, there goes works from yesterday.
It's probably much better than being so conceited or complacent that you think, oh, I don't have anything else to learn. And then there's people that just easily come in and say, well, this could use improving right here. And then you're not willing to accept that. You do have room to grow, or that you can always do better.
You have to, like you said, like we said, it's your own worst critic, but you have to give yourself some slack too. Give yourself a break. You just grew. You got better. You saw the errors. That's huge. I know a bunch of artists that I used to follow and think they were amazing when I was young, and then I realized very quickly that their egos were bigger than their pen, so to speak. And I grew really discouraged in trying to look at their art again, because all I saw was me. I have the most amazing me. And I was looking at the art and I'm like, no, you don't have anything, you. It looks awful. It's suddenly all the art that I had been admiring for so many years looked awful because the ego took over. And that's terrible.
I can think of a few artists that used to work for big name companies that are like that.
Yeah. My personal advice, stay humble. Please, try to stay humble. Sorry, go ahead.
Agreed.
Yeah. But, I don't know, just don't give up. It's going to be really hard sometimes. You're going to sit there and you're going to look at your art and go, we all have it. Even, like, as hard as it might be to believe, every artist, every person in the industry is having those moments where we're sitting there staring at it going, I can't do this anymore.
Well, I can also, think even bouncing off of that too, I think I've just learned from, my time in school, you used to always be, or you perceive it from people like on ArtStation or DeviantArt, you think, these are people that did it all by themselves and stuff. And I've actually found kind of the opposite, I've actually found it that if you're willing to be humble and open about it, it's always good to kind of ask your fellow artists for help or recommendations, or even how they achieve certain things. And I found a lot of the art community will actually be very willing to share information about themselves. And it's not where I used to perceive it used to be this close guard secret where it's like this person knew this and they didn't want anybody else to know it because that was their secret.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of the opposite now. I think there are people that are willing to share that and help each other grow as artists.
Yeah, there's a lot of that out there on various forums and things, or even if you want to pay a couple bucks for somebody's Gumroad tutorial, you can learn some great stuff directly. Gumroad, it's a site where a lot of artists can put up their own content, and there's a lot of guys doing video tutorials and things of different art techniques. They usually charge $2 to $5 for each one, but that money goes directly to that artist, doesn't go through some middleman. And there's a lot of good concept artists doing stuff up there.
Not to mention that some of the artists that are famous online is strictly because of their tutorials, not because of their final pieces. So by being, humble and helping out your fellow artists, you could actually achieve a lot. So don't just closely guard your secrets to shading or your secrets to how did you do that layer effect. Spread the word. You might actually help someone, and they might actually help you in return.
And there's workshop events around the world too, where a lot of concept artists will go and gather and do tutorials. Or they used a company called Massive Black that used to do these various workshops. They're kind of, I guess, in hibernation now, sort of. But they were great because they would just get guys together and they'd have a room with just like this. These guys sitting down drawing, and you could walk up behind them, watch them work, ask them questions. It was really cool.
Yeah, and I can tell from personally, I love when people ask questions. I love when people show a genuine interest in, like, hey, can you teach me this? Because it shows that, okay, I can do something. I can actually help someone. My work could actually be more than just a pretty picture, so to speak. It's actually helping someone overcome a difficulty or, it's just nice. It's nice to know that, okay, what I'm doing is not just for me, it's for someone else too. Because art is selfish like that. Anyways, I don't know what to say.
Yeah.
Are either or both of you going to be doing the portfolio reviews later in the weekend?
I'm afraid I won't be able to be here on Sunday when they're doing that.
Same here. However, after this panel is over, I will be very happy to stay after for a few minutes and go over if you have any portfolios with you. I don't know for how long we can borrow the room for portfolio reviews, but I'll stay for as long as I can, and I'm allowed to. And we'll see if I can help out. I already see a couple of faces in the crowds which have been here previous years, so it's exciting to see people coming back.
I guess that's another question then too, like kind of playing off of what I said earlier, where I'm, a recent graduate and I'm kind of in that limbo. What is considered? I mean, is it considered normal to kind of have like that? I mean, you've got student loans coming due and everything. Is it considered normal to have like a span of 6+ months before between graduating out and?
Oh, sure can be years. I hate to tell you that, but
That's one of the things I find frustrating right now. It's like I feel
Rounding
this
up.
whole pressure. It's like I need to get a job in the industry as quickly as possible, but it's also like you said, finding the right fit.
Right.
And
Right.
not necessarily going into something, rushing into a position or trying so hard to get something that it's not necessarily the right time for that thing, or even making sure that your portfolio is strong enough. And that's the
Right.
part where I guess I keep kicking myself, is thinking that I need to have a job as soon as possible, but I also want it to be a job that that
It's relevant.
That it's actually using my abilities, and I'm not
Right.
feeling like I'm getting it over my head.
It's up to your own willpower on that one. You just can't give up. You're going to take some jobs that are not relevant. You're going to take some jobs that are relevant. You have to just keep on trucking. I mean, freelancing like mentioned, can take years sometimes.
Yep. And sometimes you might
that's
have.
the thing I need to hear too.
Sometimes you have to do something that's not at all related to what. Or one of the guys I work with, he worked at Trader Joe's for a while, where he would paint those signs and things that they had while he was working on his portfolio and trying to pick up freelance on the side.
Yeah.
So it was kind of sort of art related. But
We do have to round up a little bit. We're closing in on a stop, sadly. Session is almost over. That being said, I really, really want to thank people for coming over. I know it's been at an odd time for this panel, but it still means a lot for us, for you guys to show up. So I want to say thank you.
Yep. Thanks.
And there we go. All right. It's not fully finished, but hey, you got some shading. Woohoo, shading!
Are you both on LinkedIn?
Yes, we are. Although I barely visit it, to be frank.
Yeah, I don't go up that often, but yeah.
Yeah, kinda. All right, thanks, guys.